about this last night and this morning. I didn't have a chance to work on my talk until this morning, actually. I thought, what do I want to tell you about? You know what I really want to tell you about is the highlights of God's faithfulness. Because it really isn't about us. We are normal people. We're weak. We're sinful. We make so many mistakes. But God never does. And sometimes He takes the simplest of people and He does the most amazing things. So I want to tell you just a little bit about it. And anyway, I have no idea how long this is going to take me. So if we're out early, you'll get a break. But don't count on it. When we first went over there, I think I talked to you yesterday about within the first 6 to 8 months, God gave me 6 girls. The 6th one didn't come for another year. I forgot. She was a baby. Anyway, but I got children like right away. People just started handing me children. Here's your daughter, here's your daughter. I think God has a sense of humor because I had 4 boys. And then I went to the mission field, and He gave me my 6 girls. So I have a lot of kids. But before I got too far into raising children again, when we were still looking for a place to move, we had gone to a pastor, and we'd asked him, where do you think we should go? I mean, we didn't even know what we were going to be doing yet. We just knew that God's call was on our lives, and we had to stay. And I shared with you yesterday, when we accepted that call, we went over for a 3-month mission trip. We accepted the call while we were there from God. And at that time, we had no debt. Yay! No savings. No savings. No job. I mean, our job had to leave when we came over to Thailand. We had no donors. So, are you getting this picture? We had nothing. But we had God, and God had told us that we should stay. So we stayed, and we didn't question. I have to admit, there were times that I worried. Every single month, I was like, wonder if we're going to eat next month. But we never really had to worry about that because God knew what He was talking about. But back then, I didn't know God well enough to know that He knew what He was doing. You know, okay, so one of the first things that happened when we were searching for our property and a place to go, we went up to where Travis is currently located. And if any of you have seen any of the videos that Jonathan did about Travis's place, you'll know that the road is not good. It's a horrible trip. On the way in there, there was 19 of us in the back of a little pickup, and with all of our stuff. There was a television, and there was like all kinds of stuff in the back of this pickup. And I was up against the cab and, you know, kind of wedged in there with everybody's legs on top of me and stuff. And on the way in, I thought it was the most fun. It was just like we were on the most incredibly horrendous road you've probably never seen one like that. There was a boulder in this road that was, about that tall. And half of the truck had to be up there, and the other half was down there. So the truck is tilted like this, and it's kind of like with like dirt walls on either side. So there's like, I'm looking at it, you know, going, well, if it tips, it's not going to go very far, right? It's going to run into the wall there. Anyway, that's the kind of area it was at. But we went up to this village where they were having the closing exercises for the school. And so they had a really nice church service. There was communion, and that was where I first learned to take a bath in public. It was kind of embarrassing, but I learned a lot on that trip. But on Saturday night, this is an Adventist school, they were having a rock concert. And they had big speakers. They had their electric guitars. I mean, this is way out in the jungle. You wouldn't think they'd have stuff like that out there, but they did. And they asked us to sing for the rock concert. And we were, I mean, it's like we were new over there. We didn't realize that Christians in that part of the world don't even know what it means to be a Christian. But that was kind of our first experience, and we talked about it. It was just, we said, well, we could sing Near, Still Nearer, maybe. I mean, I can sing harmony, and my husband doesn't carry a tune, but we did our best. So we sang Near, Still Nearer for the rock concert. For a little bit, the electric guitar guy tried to, pick out he couldn't do it, so he finally stopped. And as soon as we were done singing, we left. Whew, we didn't want to be there. It was really awkward. And so the next day we left. On our way out, that truck that we were in the back of rolled. And fortunately, nobody was killed. I got a torn shoulder, and one of the other pastors has a broken arm. But we all survived it, but I've never gone back there. But that is where my son has his school now. And fast forward 7 years, he came to visit me, and he was trying to explain to me about this guy in his village. He's like, oh, the one, he's the lay pastor. He's the one that does the sermons and everything while I'm gone. And I'm like, I don't know that I remember him. He's like, oh, Mom, you met him. He was at the rock concert. He was the one playing the electric guitar, and he was all drunk. I was like, what? He's a lay pastor? What happened? I mean, how can this be? He's like, oh, didn't I ever tell you the story? I was like, no. What story? He says, well, you remember that rock concert, don't you? I was like, well, yeah, I remember. We sang Near, Still Near. It was really embarrassing. He's like, well, the guy that played the electric guitar, he watched us sing that song, and it changed his life. We never preached a sermon. We never talked to him about God. We didn't even know that we were having any kind of an impact on his life, but it changed his life. That's what being a missionary is about. It's simply living your life for the glory of God, no matter what anybody else is doing around you. You may have to sing for a rock concert. I don't know. Another story from that time. We had moved on to this property where they had built this training center, but there was nobody there. I mean, people from America donated money. It was a beautiful spot, but nobody there knew what to do with it. And so that's where we ended up moving. We thought, well, we can't have this place empty. So we moved there, and we started trying to learn the language, and then people started giving us kids. And students started coming to us because they wanted to learn English. English is a big pull. Everybody wants to learn English in Asia. So if you speak English, you can be a missionary. It's great. Anyway, so we had students living in our home. They'd come. There was one student in particular that when he came, I took one look at him and just shook my head. He looked like a rock star. Got the long hair and just, I was thinking, this guy is never going to make it. He's just not going to make it because this is a Christian home. But we did our best. He stayed throughout the whole year, and he was very quiet. I wasn't even sure if he was learning English, but he didn't cause any problem, and he did cut his hair, and so I thought, well, it wasn't a total failure. I just don't know that we did any good. But when he had first come, I always sit him down and I'd say, well, what are your goals in life? What do you want to do with your life? And he had told me, I want to be a general. His dad was a general, and there was still a war going on at that time, and so that's what he wanted to be. So I'm thinking the whole time, it's like, well, how do you train a general? I don't really know how to do that. So we just, they're living in our home, so we just do our normal thing, and we teach them every evening, but the following year, he wasn't able to come back because his home was on the other side of the fighting, and the fighting had gotten so intense at that time that he couldn't get back to school at the end of vacation. So we didn't see him again And I was really disappointed that he wasn't able to come back the next year. But then we ended up having to leave that location because the neighbors had gotten speakers and they were blasting rock music at our school continuously, and it wasn't working. You can't have a Christian school in the middle of a rock concert. It just doesn't work. Anyway, so we moved way up north, like 24 hours north of where we had been. And about, No, that was by bus. By bus. It's not that big of a country, but traveling is complicated. So we were living up there then, and after, I don't know how long we were there, but we got a call from him, from Sharon. I'm in the refugee camp. Can you come pick me up? I'm ready to come back to school. And I'm like, we don't even have a school now. But sure, you can come. I mean, they'd just been living with us before. So my husband at that time was the director for another school. And so we thought, well, yeah, he can come and we'll just teach him, you know. Now, when he got to our place, once again, he brought two people with him, his cousins and a friend or something. Anyway, when he got there, I just sat him down like I always do and said, okay, so you still want to be a general, right? He's like, no. I said, you don't? What do you want to do now? He says, I'm going to be a missionary. I said, a missionary? Are you a Christian? He says, I am now. I said, well, what made you decide to be a missionary? He says, well, when I was living with you before, I couldn't understand you. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't understand, but I watched your family, and I saw that there was a difference. He says, you just seemed so peaceful and so happy, and I decided I wanted that. And so when I went back to my village, I just copied you. He says, everybody made fun of me, but there's no Christians in that village, and so of course they were going to make fun of me, and so I prayed in English so they wouldn't understand what I was saying. So he stayed with us. I was actually surprised at how much English he had learned because he told me this in English. But he stayed with us for about another 8 months, and then he came to me and he said, Mommy, I can't stay any longer. I've got to go back to my village. They don't know Jesus. I have to tell them. I haven't seen him since. But somewhere out there in the jungles of Burma, he's trying to be a missionary on his own. And once again, it wasn't our preaching. It wasn't what we said. It was how we live our lives. And we can only praise God for that because we don't live our lives in a perfect way. We're no better than anybody else. And we get upset with each other and actually argue sometimes. We are not always patient with our children like we should be. But it seems like when you give your life to God, he blinds people. I mean, he might open our eyes, but he also blinds people, I'm sure of it, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to use us. But he does when we're willing to give what we do have to him. The next story is about a year after this. We were at a school where there was 27 missionaries. And to me, that's a horrifying thing because Thailand has almost no missionaries. And they were all in one spot. And we decided, after some experiences that told us that God was asking us to move, we decided that we needed to find a place to go again. It seemed like God never let us stay in one place for very long. So it was a little discouraging, but we decided we've got to find a place. So I sat the kids down and started talking to them about it. What do we want to do? And they all agreed that they did not want to be in an area that already had established churches. They wanted to go to a dark area. But there was a major problem because I have a really bad back. I fell off a horse when I was like 15, I think I was, and I got a compression fracture, and since then my back is like toast. It just doesn't do very well. And so I can't handle the kinds of road that Travis lives on. I mean, I just can't do it. And in order to get to the dark areas of Thailand, other than the cities, which our family wasn't really cut out for, we're jungle missionaries. We can't help it. Anyway, you have to go on these horrible roads. And so we were sitting there thinking, oh, what are we going to do? You know, we don't want to be on the highway. We want to be way out where the people really need us. But how do we do that? And so one afternoon, my son Jason came up with an idea. He's like, what about a river? We could live down a river, and then we could take a boat. And a boat is nice and smooth, so you could live there. And we're like, yeah, let's try that. And so we started searching. They go for drives, you know, they'd look for, like, Mae Hong Son province is, like, not got a lot of Christians in it anymore. And so we thought, we'd asked some of the pastors, and they said, yeah, go to Mae Hong Son, that's a dark area. And so they went driving, and they tried to find villages, and everything was, like, too close to the cities and not where the mountain tribes really needed the help. But everywhere they found that was perfect was on a bad road. So Jason got out Google Earth, and he was looking at it. He had taught at one of the refugee camps years before. And he's like, you know, this river here, it goes down to where that refugee camp was. And that was such a neat area, and it's really dark there. There's no hardly any Christians in that area. And so we started looking at it, and we, you know, scroll way in. It's like, look at here. There's this creek here. Maybe we could start a school right here. And so we got really enthusiastic about this idea. But we were thinking, well, how are we ever going to get that place? I mean, you can't just go park on some property that you find and build a school. You can't do that. So I don't remember all the details of how it happened, but I know my husband went out looking for a place, and Jason also was looking for a place, and somehow they met up in Mingao. And they stopped there, and they went to this little restaurant, and they said, hey, you know, we're thinking about moving to this area. Is there, like, any houses or anything? And the lady was so excited. She was, like, so excited. So she took them up to the school, and she introduced them to the director of the Thai school, and they talked some, and it was agreed that we would go and teach at the Mingao school. And they'd give us a house to live in and everything. And we were thinking, okay, this is a good opening for this community, and then maybe we could ask them for land or something to build our own school. And so we moved there, and then when we got there, Jason, I think it was, I don't know where he's at. He's probably hiding in the back. He doesn't want to have to tell the story. Anyway, he went to the umper, which is like the head of the whole province thing. And he told him kind of what we wanted to do. And the umper says, just go find a place. You can do anything you want. Just let me know where you're at. And we're like, whoa, who ever heard of something like that happening? I mean, that's unheard of. And so we hired a boat because we didn't have our own boat. We call him the boat grandpa. The boat grandpa took Jason down there, and they found a spot that was just perfect, way out in the jungle. No loudspeakers anywhere around. The closest village was about 1 kilometer away. There was creeks coming down the mountain. It was perfect for what we wanted to do. Because our dream at that point was to build a training school. Because we had discovered that even though there's a lot of Adventists in that area, they have no idea what it means to be an Adventist. I mean, our pastor at our first church would play Harry Potter movies to the congregation on Saturday afternoons. During the church service, their cell phones would go off. It was always the worst of the rock music on their cell phones. It was very obvious even though a lot of people say those people are reached, sorry, but they're not. They don't they don't know. And it's not that they're not sincere. It's just that they don't know what it means to even be a Christian. And so we wanted to have a training school where we could train young people to be missionaries to their own people. Because obviously that's the most effective way of reaching the millions that are there. It's just that they don't have the tools. They don't have reliable, their Bibles aren't that accurate. They don't have spirit of prophecy. They just don't have the resources that we have. And they don't have the backgrounds that we have. So we moved down to this little piece of jungle. We cleared it. And then Jason went to the refugee camp, and he kind of put out the word, we're going to have school. And there was like hundreds of students that wanted to come. Hundreds. I told him, no, we will not accept hundreds. We will take 20 at the most. And during hot season, we had like a hot season school. We had 100 students go through there at that time, but in 2-week increments, so it wasn't more than like 35 or 40 at a time. That was a lot of work. But out of those students, we chose 20 that could stay for the school year. And we had the most ideal situation down there. Most of the students came because they wanted to learn English, but 9 of the students made it. They stayed because they wanted to know Jesus. And John, do you have video? I just want to show you one little short video from our school. us to have 2 beautiful years down there in the jungle. Then the government changed its laws, and we were forced to move. Our school was closed down. And you know, at the time that happened, we did not understand. We really didn't understand. It was so hard to send our students home when they were just learning about God. But out of the 9 students that survived the work program, today, 3 of those students are teachers at Travis's school. They would not have gone there if our school hadn't closed. 4 more of them, so that's 7 of our students, 4 more of them were just baptized, and they are now missionaries. I mean, like, they started working for God before they were baptized, but now. So out of our 9 students so far, 7 of them are missionaries. God is good, and he knows what he's doing, whether we understand it or not. And if we're totally surrendered to him, he can do with us what he wants. I know you got to see some of my little girls up there, too. my one, the youngest one, Destiny Grace, she had cut her hair with the scissors, so she looked a little funny at that point. But okay, while we were living at the school, I have 2 stories from there that I just have to share real quick. I am already running out of time. One day, Sarah, she's sitting back there. She was my volunteer for several years. She and the little girls and I were home alone. Sarah was weaving, so she was all hooked into her weaving thing. It's a backstrap loom, so she's kind of hooked in there. And I think I was sick that day or something, because we were just like laying around, which wasn't normal. But, and everybody else was gone. So it was just the little girl, Sarah, and I. And I went into the bedroom to get my drawing book. I'm pretty sure I was sick, because I only draw when I'm sick. But anyway, I walked in the room, and we don't have beds like Americans do, okay? So our bed is just like this little tiny thin foam pad on the floor with blankets and pillows and stuff. Anyway, I was walking over there, and I reached down to pick up my book, and I felt something under my foot. That's a bad thing to experience in the jungle. It was a snake. And that snake didn't bite me. Fortunately, but it darted underneath my pillow. And I did what all brave missionary mothers would do. I screamed and I jumped and I ran. And I'm standing up in the living room. It was like different levels. So I was up on the living room going, I don't know how to climb anywhere where that snake can't get. And so I'm yelling, snake, snake. And my girls, they're little girls, you know, and they jumped right in. One of them handed me an iron bar. I'm like, what? I can't kill a snake. And so I don't know how old Mary Beth was at that time, but she's like, they're all running. Some of them grabbed machetes, some of them grabbed the hoe. I think Mary Beth ended up with the hoe. And so she goes in there, and Esther was standing up on the ledge, like next to the bed, and she reaches over and moves the pillow, and that snake comes darting out, and Mary Beth had the hoe, and she starts going like this on my bed, trying to kill this snake. And she killed it. She also about ruined my bed, but it reminded me of that verse in Psalms that said that you will tread upon the lion, or the snake. You're going to step on snakes. It happened to me. It was a very poisonous snake. But it didn't bite me. It just went under my pillow. I've also found snake skins under my pillow. And if anybody knows how long it takes a snake to shed its skin, please let me know, because I've always worried about that. Anyway, another incident that happened while we had a school is when we were first building our school. It's kind of hard to explain, but we had our house, which was down kind of like in the valley, and then up the hill a ways, there was a kitchen building with a an outhouse beside it. And then we built the big school building that you saw in the video. That was over here. And one weekend, it was a Friday, and we allowed the students to go home once a month. And this was not a home leave weekend. It was not. But one after another, the students came to us and they said, you know, Mommy and Daddy, they always call, everybody calls me Mommy, even the old men in the village. They said, we need to go home because of this, or because of that, or because, and one after another, all but 4 of the students went home. And they had good reasons. They were valid reasons. There were nothing that they had said that wasn't right. So Friday afternoon, there was only 4 students and then us. And every Friday afternoon, I had a baking class for them. I figured if they learned how to make bread, then they could sell it wherever it's part of their education. They could make a business out of it. So that afternoon, we were all in the kitchen making bread. And normally on a Friday afternoon, it's a little bit more relaxed. We're cleaning and getting ready for Sabbath. But every Friday afternoon, the students would hang out in the building, our big school building. And but that day, there was nobody in there. We were all in the kitchen baking. Well, while we were cooking, the wind kind of picked up a little bit, and all of a sudden we heard this crash. We looked out, and a tree, a 90-foot mango tree, that's this big around, had fallen smack dab across our classroom and totally, completely destroyed it. Now, if that isn't a miracle, I don't know what is, because there was nobody in that building. There is no way anybody could have survived that. But God is good, and He protects us all the time. Now, when the government came and told us that we had to close our school, it's kind of a long story, so I'm going to try to make it short because I don't have much time. But at first, we had thought that we were going to have some time because we were looking for a place to move. We didn't know where to go next. If we don't have a school, what do? We didn't know. We knew that God was leading. We knew God had put us there. And so we just knew that we have to move somewhere. So we were kind of looking for property again and trying to figure out what we were going to do next. And then I was headed up the river one, was it a Sunday? Yeah. Okay, it was a Sunday. We were headed up the river. We were going to go shopping, I think it was. And coming down the river to meet us was this huge boatload of soldiers. And they have big guns over there. I don't know if you've seen their guns, but they're huge. These soldiers were not smiling. They were really serious soldiers, and they made us get out of our boat, and we got out onto the sandbar, and they're standing around with their guns, and they're like, you've got 1 week to move. And not only did we have 1 week, but they wanted the jungle cleared of everything. So our school had Mango Hall, which is what we named our new building after the mango tree smashed it. Mango Hall was a rather large building. I don't know what the square footage was, but it was big. And then we had our house, and we had a girls' dorm that we had just finished. And then we had a new girls' dorm we had an old girls' dorm, then we had the new girls' dorm. We had a bathroom, we had a hydro system, and we had a solar system. And they said everything had to be moved in 1 week. And they had already sent all their students home. Now, out in the jungle, you don't have cell phone service. You don't have any kind of form of communication. And so we went back to the school, and we're like, this was at the beginning of March. I think it was March. And so that's the beginning of hot season. So we're talking really hot weather. We're up on the side of a mountain. And so we were looking at these buildings, and Jason and my husband and all of us there were like, well, we've got 2 days per building. Let's see what we can do. And so we started in tearing apart these buildings. And you can't just tear them apart and throw them away. You can't just tear them apart and burn them because we needed this stuff. And if we're going to build somewhere else, you can't just burn your buildings. And so we took them apart. And then we started carrying them down the trail to the boat. And if you saw the boat, it's kind of like a long canoe with it's not very big. But anyway, we put all of our building supplies in there and all of our stuff. We had all the stuff for school. We had all our stuff for our house. We had so much stuff. But we were like running up and down, trying to get things packed and moved. And it was hot. So very hot. And we were just like, Lord, how is this even possible? I mean, I know we have to do it. The government says we do, but there was only 9 of us, and 5 of them were children. And I think that's right. My numbers might be 4. Maybe 4 of them were children, and 5 of us were adults. Yeah, that's how it was. Anyway, and so Shoshana got heat exhaustion, and she got so sick she couldn't work anymore. And so she laid in a hammock and took care of the little ones while we continued working. And one day, I don't know if it was Shoshana or Sarah and I, but we were in Mango Hall tearing it apart, working as hard as we could when we heard a noise. And we looked up, and down that pathway came 18 brown-skinned angels. Somehow our students had gotten word that we had 1 week to move. And even though they had to hike, I don't know how many hours, 6 hours from the refugee camp in order to get there, and it was very dangerous for them to be there because the government had already sent them home, they came. And by Friday, we were taking the very last load of stuff down to the river when the military showed up. They came up that path, they had their big guns and everything, and they were like, wow, there was nothing left. And they're kind of looking at us as soon as the boat had pulled in, our students had just melted into the jungle. But they're kind of looking at us like, we were expecting to get a bribe, but God had sent help right when we needed it. When we told them that our students had helped us, they didn't even get upset. They were just like so amazed because it was an impossible job that God did. He made it possible. He gave us the strength and the energy, even in that incredible heat, to move all that stuff. I haven't even told you that half of it because like all of our posts for our building is either teak or ironwood it's the stuff that lasts, but it is so heavy. It's really, really heavy wood, and we had to drag those logs up the river for 1 kilometer. That was hard work, but God, once again, He just pulled it off, and He made it possible. When we left there, there's a lot more to this story. I wish I had time to tell it all, but God had opened the doors to the village where we are in currently. He had sent my son, Jason, and one of our students to fix a tractor there. And that was like a month before we even knew we were going to have to leave. And the head woman of that village, she said, wow, couldn't you guys come up here, and teach? And so my husband had been going up to that village once a week and teaching in their school. Well, when they found out that we didn't have a place to go, they were really, really excited about having us move there. And so they ended up selling us a little piece of property there, and it's like, I don't know how big it is, maybe only 1.5 acres or something. We found out once we got there that really we couldn't have a school there. And so the first year we were there, we were kind of like swinging in our hammocks, wondering what to do. Because when you move to a new area, it doesn't matter if you were just, 7 kilometers down the hill. you got to get to know people all over again. Nobody knows you. They don't trust you. It's a very relationship-oriented society. And so you have to develop their trust and a relationship with them before you can even work with them. We knew they were watching us that first year. We would see them peering through the bushes, but they didn't really come to visit very often, and we just felt useless, especially after our experience in the jungle, where everything was going so well. So we didn't really know what God had in mind. And it seemed like we were completely useless. I mean, that's how it felt. I still had all my kids, and I was still raising them for God, still homeschooling them, but I really just felt like a fish out of water. I didn't know what to do. And I was starting to feel really guilty for accepting donations every month, because I'm thinking, well, here we are just sitting here doing nothing. I mean, this is terrible. It's the worst feeling in the world. But during that year, God was working on my heart. He said, you know what? I'm the one in charge. And I realized that I have to be willing to be everything or nothing for God. If he asks me to swing in a hammock, I need to be willing to swing in a hammock. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me at all, but it does to God. During that year, we did a lot of Bible study. We did an awful lot of Bible study. And one of our volunteers, Sharon, became an Adventist that year. 2 of my older kids were baptized that year. What looked like a failure to me at first turned out to be a big blessing. And, okay, I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to tell you about the start of what we're doing now. Maybe it was last August. My daughter, Esther, she got sick. And I'm not sure exactly what she was doing, but she was over at the head woman's house helping her with something. And the head woman is noticing that she's sick, and she's saying, Esther, why don't you just go to the hospital? And Esther said, oh, I don't need to. My mom takes care of me. The head woman said, she what? She's like, well, my mom takes care of me. She always takes care of us if we get sick. And she's like, oh, does she? Well, just as a little background, I'm nothing. I mean, Andrew and I went to school together and we got our EMT license, but if you know anything about that, that's not much. It's great training and everything, but it's not a doctor. When my kids were little, well, before I got married, I wanted to be a doctor. And so I had studied a lot, and my mom is a nurse, and so I was always asking her for her nursing stories and all this stuff. And I just thought that would be a load of fun to be a doctor. But then I got married. My husband didn't want me to have to work, and so I didn't become a doctor. But I did become the primary care physician for my family, because that's what I was interested in. And I did a lot of natural remedies and stuff on them because that was fun. And then when I became an EMT, it was just even more fun because I knew more about what I was doing. But that's all my background is, okay? But anyway, so the first thing I knew about this is the head woman came over, and she brought this old lady who could hardly walk and an old man. And she sat him down underneath my house, and she said, they need help. And I just looked at them, and I said, so what's wrong with them? She's like, well, I don't know. Her foot's swollen. Her knee hurts. So I looked at her knee and her leg, and there was no redness. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know anything. And the old guy, his back hurt. And I was thinking, well, my back hurts too. I mean, I don't know what to do. I turned to the head woman and I said, would it be okay if I asked a nurse to come here? And she's like, oh, please, will you do that? Will you ask a nurse? And I was like, sure, I'll ask a nurse. Surely I can get a nurse. I mean, everybody wants to be a mission nurse, right? Wrong. So I did. I tried. I tried to get a nurse to come, and nobody came. And I didn't know what else to do, and so I kept praying about it. And in the back of my mind, this little still small voice, which can be a little irritating when you don't want to listen, kept saying, why don't you do something? And I thought, well, I mean, I can try. I don't know anything, but maybe I can try. Well, the head woman didn't give up. I don't know why she didn't, but she kept bringing people to me. Then one day, they were little things then, and it wasn't such hard things as the first one. So I started doing a little tiny bit. But then one day, the next door neighbor lady, she came over and she mentioned to one of my girls, they don't talk to me because I can't speak the language, but she mentioned to one of my girls, she said, my dad's really sick in this other village, and if your mom could do anything, I wish she would. And I was thinking, okay, I promised God that I would at least try. And so I was all ready to go, But then the lady didn't even take me over there. And so I'm thinking, well, that lets me off the hook. I don't even know where this is. And so I didn't go, but a couple of days later, they asked me again if I would go. And so I told them, okay, I will right after I eat lunch. And while I was eating lunch, I have this big natural remedies book. And so I opened the book, and it landed on acute bronchitis. And so I was sitting there eating my lunch, reading about acute bronchitis. And then we got in the truck, and we went over to this other village. And guess what that guy had? Acute bronchitis. And that was kind of the beginning. I don't have the answers. But God sent me, one of my friends last year when I was here, she gave me a set of books. And she said, oh, I thought that you might enjoy these. And so I took them home, and then I hurt my back, so I had to be down for a month in my hammock. And I had a lot of time to read. And so I started reading these books, and I got more and more and more excited. It's like, you know what? I can actually do this. And even though God never sent me a nurse, today I am our village doctor. And they bring me all kinds of terrible things. And every time they bring me something new, I have to pray and just say, God, you're going to have to do this because I don't know what to do. So I'll walk into my cellar, look at all my stuff, and just pray and say, okay, God, what can I do for this one? And he gives me ideas. I go out and I do it. And you know what? These people get well. We had this one guy come to us recently. He had a terrible infection in his leg. He said that he was working in the rice field and he'd gotten like a stick poked into his leg, and he'd gone to the hospital and they had taken the stick out. And then I don't know how long it had been exactly, but that leg was swollen up huge from the knee down, and it was just disgusting. I mean, really disgusting. I was thinking, if he doesn't have gangrene, he's going to really soon, okay? It was really bad. And so I go into my cellar and I pray and I say, okay, we can do charcoal poultices, charcoal and flaxseed, and I can put him on a vitibiotic. And, I was just thinking of all these things that we could do. And so we started working on it. And I worked on that leg for 30 days, 2 poultices a day, morning and evening. And we'd gotten the leg looking really good, except for that there was just a little bit of infection left. And finally he came to me and he said, you know what, you need to just do surgery. You need to open up this leg and find out what's in there. And I'm thinking, surgery? I'm not a doctor. I can't do surgery. But I got this son that's really brave. And so we tried to talk him into going to the hospital and doing it, and he wouldn't. He just absolutely refused. So I told Jason, okay, listen, we have lidocaine. We can do this. We just, you do the cutting and I'll mop it up, And so we did, and we were so careful. I mean, we cut a little tiny bit, and we'd look around in there and try to see, couldn't see anything. We finally got a piece of bark out. And we thought, that's it. That's what's been causing this infection all these, weeks. And so then I put people paste on it, got it all squared away, and he went on his merry way. We were all happy because I hadn't killed him, and, and we got something out. Well, several days later, he came back, and the hole that the original stick had gone through that we had put the people paste on, and that was all healed up, but another hole had opened on the side of his leg. And I was like, oh no, and it's all infected again. So I was cleaning it, and I was looking at it, and I thought, oh, something's in there. And just then, Jason came walking down from his house, and so I said, hey, Jason, I think something's in there. And so he comes over, and he looks, and he starts pulling on it. And I'm thinking, what if it's a tendon? You know, but he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he got a sliver out like that. And it was like a 1/4 inch wide and thick. It was a tree in his leg. It was no wonder he had this horrible infection. But, I mean, it took persistence. But the very next day, he's stomping his legs, and he's showing everybody the sliver in the village. And within the next few weeks, we had done 4 surgeries on people. I'm just learning how to suture. I'm just learning all these things. Somebody said earlier today, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And that is so true. Not only has the medical work opened up for us, and we're reaching villages all around us now. It's not just our 3 villages that we were originally working with. It's all these other villages. The people trust us. They've accepted us into their villages, and calls come in for help all the time. And we found out that there was people in our village that were starving to death. So now it started out with, when I heard that, it was like, I don't have much, but what I have I'm going to give. Nobody's going to go hungry around me. And so we went to our own pantry, and we took our own food, and we took it to those people. By the end of that week, a friend of ours, he's another missionary over there, he says, you know, people have been bringing me truckloads of stuff, and I got to get rid of it. Do you mind if I bring you a load? And I was just like, I didn't know what he was going to bring me. But he came with a truck that only an Asian could load, full of stuff. I mean, there was oil, there was noodles, there was, everything any poor villager could ever desire was in that truckload. It was so much stuff that I filled an entire bedroom full of it. It was a good thing Becky was gone, otherwise she wouldn't have had a place to sleep that night. But we can't outgive the God. We've tried it. I mean, we just, like, you need it? Okay, here it is. And God gives us more, and we can't keep up. It's like, I don't have enough storage room in my house these days, because the more we give, the more he gives us. And anyway, so that opened up. And my husband has started teaching English again. We don't have our own school anymore, but he is going into the Thai schools in a bunch of the villages around us, and he's teaching English and opening up doors that way. Since I've been here, the head woman of our village has decided to become a Christian. And I wish I had more time, but I have just seen miracles happen. And, you know, God can do anything with us if we're willing to surrender all that we are, even if it isn't much, to him. This is one of my favorite quotes from Christ's Object Lessons. It says, we need to have far less confidence in what man can do and far more confidence in what God can do for every believing soul. He longs to have you reach after him by faith. He longs to give you understanding in temporal as well as in spiritual matters. He can sharpen the intellect. He can give tact and skill. Put your talents into the work and ask God for wisdom, and it will be given you.